The last thing I heard was the rain. It wasn't a gentle patter. It was a torrential downpour, hammering against the roof of my Porsche Panamera like gravel being dumped from a truck. The wipers were fighting a losing battle, slapping back and forth in a frantic rhythm. Beside me, Sophie was laughing. She had her hand on my knee, her warmth seeping through my jeans. She was saying something about the dinner reservation, her lips moving in that beautiful way they always did when she was excited. Then came the screech. It wasn't a sound you hear with your ears. It was a vibration that rattled your teeth. Headlights blinded me from the passenger side. Metal screamed against metal. Glass shattered, sounding like 1,000 wind chimes falling at once. The world spun. Gravity disappeared. Then, there was nothing. No sirens. No rain. No screaming. Just a heavy, suffocating blanket of silence. I woke up in a hospital room 3 weeks later. My eyes were heavy, crusted shut. When I finally forced them open, the light was blinding. I saw a doctor standing over me. His mouth was moving. I could see the urgency in his jaw, the way his throat muscles tightened, but I couldn't hear a sound. It was like watching a television on mute. I tried to speak, to ask where Sophie was, but I couldn't hear my own voice. I only felt the vibration in my throat. The doctor wrote it down on a whiteboard. 2 sentences that ended my life as I knew it. Severe damage to auditory nerves. Permanent hearing loss. And then the second sentence, the one that broke me. Sophie didn't make it. The next few months were a blur of grief and silence. I was a wealthy architect, a man who built skyscrapers and designed acoustic concert halls. And suddenly, I was trapped in a soundless box. I retreated to my estate, a sprawling modern mansion overlooking the lake. A home Sophie and I had designed together. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. Now it was my mausoleum. That's when the vultures arrived. They didn't call. They didn't ask. My brother, Julian, along with my mother, Elena, and my father, Robert, simply showed up at the gate one rainy Tuesday. I watched them from the security monitor. Julian was driving his red convertible, looking impatient. Mom was checking her makeup in the mirror. Dad looked tired, or maybe just indifferent. I buzzed them in, thinking they were here to comfort me. I was desperate for connection, for family. I was wrong. They arrived with suitcases. Not overnight bags. Suitcases. Huge, hard-shell luggage that looked like they were moving in. My mother, Elena, rushed to me as I opened the door. She grabbed my face, her mouth moving rapidly. She was crying or performing crying. I couldn't tell anymore. She hugged me, but her eyes were scanning the hallway, looking at the art on the walls, the marble floors. Julian walked past me without even a handshake. He dropped his bags in the middle of the living room and immediately walked over to the bar. I watched him pour a glass of my vintage scotch, a bottle Sophie had bought me for our anniversary, one I was saving. He drank it in one gulp. I pulled out my tablet, my new way of communicating. I typed, "How long are you staying?" Mom read it and patted my hand condescendingly. She pulled out a notepad from her purse. She came prepared and wrote, "We are here to take care of you, Leo. You are disabled now. You can't be alone. We are family." Family. That word used to mean everything to me. Now, staring at them, it felt like a contract I hadn't agreed to sign. Julian didn't write anything. He just smirked, grabbed an apple from the bowl, and took a bite, looking around the living room like he was measuring it for curtains. The invasion happened fast. Within a week, they had established a routine. I was moved out of the master bedroom. Mom wrote that it was too depressing for me to sleep in the bed I shared with Sophie. She said I needed a fresh start. So they moved me to the guest suite on the ground floor. It was smaller, darker, and conveniently further away from the main areas of the house. Julian took the master suite. I protested. I typed furiously on my tablet, slamming it down on the coffee table. "That is Sophie's room. No one sleeps there." Mom just gave me that look. The one she used to give me when I was a child and complained about Julian breaking my toys. A look of pity mixed with annoyance. She wrote back, "Julian needs his space. He is helping manage the estate. Don't be selfish, Leo. You're not in a right state of mind. Selfish. I had lost my wife and my hearing, and I was being called selfish for wanting to preserve my bedroom. Life became a series of humiliations. Because I couldn't hear, they stopped treating me like a person. They treated me like a piece of furniture. They would have animated conversations at the dinner table, laughing, arguing, gesturing, while I sat there eating in silence, staring at my plate. Sometimes, I would look up and catch Julian mimicking me. He would move his mouth silently, making exaggerated faces, mocking my struggle to read lips. Dad would chuckle. Mom would swat Julian's arm playfully, not correcting him, just telling him not to be so obvious. I felt isolated. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my guest room and the garden where I spent hours staring at the lake. The only person who looked at me with genuine eyes was Sarah, our housekeeper. She had been with Sophie and me for 5 years. She was a quiet woman in her 50s, hardworking and loyal. When the accident happened, she was the one who made sure I ate. When my family moved in, I saw the change in her. One afternoon, about 6 months into their occupation, I walked into the kitchen. Sarah was scrubbing a pot, scrubbing it so hard her knuckles were white. She was crying. I touched her shoulder. She jumped, startled. When she turned, her face was red. I motioned, asking what was wrong. She hesitated, looking toward the door to make sure no one was coming. Then she pulled out her phone and typed, "Your mother told me I can't cook your favorite meals anymore. She said the ingredients are too expensive. She cut my salary, Mr. Leo. She said you authorized it." My blood ran cold. I hadn't authorized anything. I was paying the bills, or so I thought. I had given my father temporary power of attorney over the household accounts to handle the utilities while I was recovering in the hospital. I hadn't revoked it yet because I was depressed and, frankly, I trusted him. He was my father. I took Sarah's phone and typed, "I will fix this. I promise." But fixing it was harder than I thought. When I confronted Dad about the salary, he didn't even look up from the newspaper. He wrote on a napkin, "Cash flow issues, medical bills. We have to tighten the belt. Don't worry your head about finance, son. Focus on healing." Tighten the belt? I looked out the window. In the driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun, was a brand new Lamborghini Urus. My Lamborghini Urus. The one I had ordered before the accident, the one that was delivered while I was in rehab. I hadn't driven it once. Julian was walking toward it, twirling the keys, my keys, on his finger. He was wearing my golf jacket. He got in, revved the engine. I could feel the vibration of the engine through the floorboards, and peeled out of the driveway. I turned back to my father. I pointed at the window. Dad just shrugged. He wrote, "Cars need to be driven, Leo. It's bad for the engine to sit. Julian is doing maintenance." Maintenance. That's what they called it. The anger started to build then. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow burn, like charcoal. I realized I wasn't a patient recovering in the care of his loving family. I was a host organism and they were the parasites. But what could I do? I was deaf. I was depressed. And according to the paperwork my mother kept waving in my face, I was fragile. Then came the email that changed everything. It was late at night. I was in the guest room, unable to sleep. The silence was deafening. I opened my laptop to check my private email, the one my family didn't have the password to. There was a message from Dr. Eris Thorne. He was a neurosurgeon I had consulted briefly in the early days, a maverick in the field. Subject: experimental protocol/auditory nerve regeneration. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it open. "Leo, I know the prognosis was grim, but we've had a breakthrough with the new synthetic nerve grafting technique. It's risky. It's unapproved by the general board yet. But based on your scans, I think you're a candidate. 60% success rate. If it works, you get your life back. If it fails, you lose the residual nerve endings forever. Facial paralysis is a risk. Let me know." I read it 10 times. 60%. It wasn't great odds. But looking at the ceiling of the guest room, thinking about Julian driving my car and my mother cutting Sarah's salary, I realized I had nothing left to lose. I didn't tell them. If I told them, they would talk me out of it. They would say it's too dangerous, too expensive. Or worse, they would pretend to support me while sabotaging it behind my back. I needed to do this alone. Living in a house where you are invisible is a unique form of torture. It gives you too much time to think, too much time to remember. As I prepared for my secret trip to see Dr. Thorne, the atmosphere in the house grew more suffocating. My mother, Elena, had decided that the gloomy atmosphere of the house was bad for my recovery, so she began redecorating. She didn't just move furniture. She erased Sophie. Started small. The throw pillows Sophie had hand-stitched were replaced with generic, gold-tasseled ones that looked like they belonged in a cheap hotel lobby. Then the paintings. Sophie was an amateur artist. Her watercolors of the Maine coastline were abstract, moody, and beautiful. They were my most prized possessions. One morning, I walked into the hallway to find the walls bare. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I ran to the living room. There, piled in a corner like trash, were Sophie's frames. My mother was directing 2 movers to hang giant, gaudy mirrors in their place. I ran over, grabbing my mother's arm. I was making sounds, guttural, unformed noises of protest. I pointed at the paintings, my eyes wide, pleading. My mother sighed. She adjusted her silk blouse, looking annoyed that I had touched her. She pulled out her notepad. "We need to brighten the place up, Leo. Those paintings are depressing. You need positive energy. I'm putting them in storage." Storage. That's where they wanted to put my entire life. I watched Julian walk in. He was eating a bagel, crumbs falling onto the floor that Sarah had just cleaned. He saw me standing protectively over the paintings and laughed. I saw his shoulders shake. He said something to Mom. I read his lips. "He's losing it, Mom. Look at him. Obsessed with junk." Junk. I closed my eyes and a memory hit me, vivid and painful. I was 12. Julian was 8. We were in the backyard of our old house. I had spent 3 weeks building a complex Lego castle. It was my masterpiece. Julian had come running through the yard with a baseball bat, swinging wildly at invisible enemies. He smashed right into the castle. Legos shattered everywhere. I had shoved him, not hard, just away from my work. He fell and scraped his knee. He screamed like he had been shot. Mom came running out. She didn't look at the destroyed castle. She didn't ask what happened. She scooped Julian up, cooing at him. Then she turned to me, her eyes cold. "Leo, you are the older brother. You have to be responsible. Why are you always hurting him? It's just toys. He's your brother." "But he broke it on purpose," I had yelled. "He's a child," Dad had said, coming out with a beer in hand. "Stop being such a crybaby, Leo. Fix it or throw it away. Fix it or throw it away." That had been the motto of my childhood. I fixed things. Julian broke things. I built a career, a fortune, a life. Julian bounced from college to college, accumulating debt, gambling away his allowance, always coming back to Mom and Dad to be fixed. And now they were all here, fixing my life by throwing it away. I knew I had to get out for the surgery. I needed a cover story. I waited until Sarah was bringing me my afternoon tea. I checked the hallway. Empty. I pulled Sarah into the pantry. It was tight, smelling of spices and dried herbs. I typed on my phone, "I need your help. I'm going away for 3 days. Medical treatment. They cannot know the truth." Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. She knew that if she was caught helping me, she'd be fired instantly. My mother had been looking for an excuse to get rid of her for weeks. Sarah took the phone. Her hands were trembling. "Where are you going, Mr. Leo? Is it dangerous?" "It's Hope," I typed. "Please." She nodded. Tears welled up in her eyes again. She took the phone and wrote, "I'll tell them you're going to that holistic retreat upstate. The one your mother kept suggesting for your mental balance. She'll believe it because she wants you out of the house." It was perfect. Mom had been pestering me to go to a silent ashram for weeks, probably so they could throw a party without the cripple hovering around. The next day, I presented the idea. I typed a note to Mom. "You're right. I need peace. I'm going to the retreat for a few days." The relief on her face was insulting. She smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in months. "Oh, Leo, that is wonderful. It will do you so much good. Take the weekend. Take the whole week." Julian was sitting on the couch, counting a stack of cash. My cash, likely withdrawn from the emergency safe. He looked up and gave me a thumbs up. I read his lips. "Finally. Have fun staring at a wall, bro." I packed my bag. I didn't take yoga clothes. I took my medical records. As I walked out to the taxi, I wasn't allowed to drive, obviously, and Julian needed the Lamborghini, and Dad was using the SUV. I took one last look at my house. It looked different. The windows seemed like eyes watching me. I felt a strange premonition. If the surgery didn't work, I wasn't coming back here. I would sell it all. I would vanish. But if it did work, if I could hear again, I clenched my fist. The taxi driver opened the door. "Airport," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, vibration without feedback. Fast. The flight to New York, where Dr. Thorne practiced, was a mix of anxiety and adrenaline. I couldn't hear the engines, the crying baby in row 4, or the flight attendant asking for my drink order. I just stared out the window at the clouds. I thought about the money. I had checked my accounts before leaving. There were discrepancies. Big ones. $50,000 transferred to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. $12,000 for home repairs that never happened. Julian's gambling debts were bleeding me dry. My lawyer, Marcus Vane, had tried to email me, but I had been too depressed to engage. Now the anger was waking me up. I arrived at Mount Sinai Hospital late that evening. Dr. Thorne met me. He looked younger than I remembered, intense and sharp. We sat in his office. He used a speech-to-text program on a large screen. "Leo, I need you to understand the reality. We are grafting synthetic conductive fibers onto your damaged auditory nerve. It's like splicing a wire. If your brain doesn't accept the signal, the feedback loop could cause chronic vertigo. You might never walk straight again." I looked at him. I thought about Julian driving my car. I thought about my mother putting Sophie's paintings in the trash. I thought about the silence. "Do it," I said. The preparation was grueling. Shaved head, MRI scans, blood work. The night before the surgery, I lay in the hospital bed. I pulled out a small photo of Sophie I kept in my wallet. "I'm coming back, Soph," I whispered into the silence. "I'm going to take back what we built." I didn't know then that the physical surgery would be the easy part. The real pain would come when the silence ended. The anesthesia wore off like a heavy fog lifting from a swamp. The first thing I felt was pain. A sharp, searing line of fire behind my right ear. My head felt like it was clamped in a vice. Then the nausea hit. The room spun violently. Dr. Thorne had warned me about the vertigo. I gripped the bed rails, my knuckles turning white, trying to anchor myself to the earth. But I was waiting for something else. I lay there for hours, eyes closed, straining. Nothing. Just the same dull, heavy silence. Despair crashed over me. Failed. I had risked everything, risked my sanity, for nothing. Tears leaked from my eyes, hot and stinging. I was a fool. A broken, deaf fool. Dr. Thorne came in. I saw him check the monitors. He looked concerned. He adjusted a dial on a device connected to the bandages on my head. Crack. It wasn't a sound. It was a physical sensation inside my skull. Like a lightning bolt. Hiss. Static. White noise. Ugly, scratching, violent static. I gasped, grabbing my head. Dr. Thorne's eyes widened. He tapped something on his tablet. "Can you hear that?" The screen read. "It hurts," I croaked. "It sounds like fire." He typed. "That is the nerve waking up. It will be chaotic. Your brain has to relearn how to interpret the signals." Over the next 24 hours, the world came back. but not in high definition. Came back in jagged shards. The beep of the monitor was a screech. The nurse's footsteps were thunderclaps. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. By day 3, the chaos began to organize itself into sound. I heard the hum of the air conditioner. I heard the distant wail of a siren in New York City. And then I heard Dr. Thorne's voice. It sounded robotic, metallic, like he was speaking through a tin can, but it was a voice. "Leo," he said, "can you hear me?" I wept. I sobbed like a child. Yes, I can hear you." The recovery was rapid. Dr. Thorne was ecstatic. "This is a miracle, Leo. Your brain plasticity is incredible. The fidelity will improve over the coming weeks." I was discharged on day 4. I had a bandage around my head, hidden under a beanie. I looked like a man who had just been to a retreat, or a man recovering from brain surgery. On the flight back to Seattle, the world was loud. Too loud. I wore noise-canceling headphones, not to hear music, but to dampen the roar of life. I had a plan. I was going to walk through that front door, hug my mother, shake my father's hand, and tell them the good news. We would celebrate. Maybe this was the fresh start we needed. Maybe, just maybe, their behavior over the last few months was just a reaction to stress. Now that I was fixed, we could be a family again. I was naive. I took an Uber from the airport. I didn't tell them I was coming back early. I wanted to surprise them. The house was quiet when I entered. It was late afternoon. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long golden shadows across the marble floor. I walked into the living room. It was empty, but I heard voices coming from the patio. My heart leaped. I could hear voices. I crept closer, a smile forming on my face. I wanted to jump out and shout, "I can hear!" Then I stopped. I heard Julian's voice, clear, distinct. "So the idiot actually went to the ashram. Can you believe it? He thinks sitting in silence is going to fix his broken brain." My smile froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I heard a woman's laugh. It wasn't my mother. It was Bella, Julian's wife. I hadn't even known she was in town. "Well, at least he's out of the house," Bella said. "It's creepy, Julian. The way he just sits there. He's like a ghost, a vegetable that breathes." "He's a cash cow that breathes, babe," Julian corrected her. I heard the clink of glass. "And once Mom gets that power of attorney finalized next week, we won't have to deal with his staring anymore. We ship him off to the facility, sell this monstrosity, and we are free." I stood there paralyzed. My hand was gripping the doorframe so hard I thought I would snap the wood. "Facility? Sell the house? Are you sure your dad is on board?" Bella asked. "Dad does whatever Mom says," Julian scoffed. "And Mom loves me more than she loves her broken toy." Leo had his time. He built his empire. Now it's my turn to spend it. I felt bile rise in my throat. Every happy memory I had of my brother, playing catch, him being the best man at my wedding, incinerated in that moment. I wanted to storm out there. I wanted to punch him until his face looked like my car wreck. But something stopped me. A cold, calculating instinct I didn't know I possessed. If I walked out there now, they would deny it. They would gaslight me. They would say I was hallucinating, that the surgery scrambled my brain. Or worse, they would realize the jig was up and accelerate their plans before I could stop them legally. I needed proof. I needed to know the full extent of the rot. I reached up and touched the small scar behind my ear. I have a superpower, I thought. Invisibility. I stepped back, moving silently on the expensive rugs. I went to the guest room, threw my bag on the bed, and messed up my hair. I put the deaf expression back on my face, the slack, vacant look they were used to. I walked out to the patio, making my footsteps heavy this time so they would feel the vibration. Julian jumped. Bella spilled her drink. They turned to look at me with wide, guilty eyes. I smiled. A sad, pathetic, deaf smile. I waved. Julian let out a breath. He turned to Bella and said, right in front of my face, "Scared the hell out of me. Look at him. He has no clue." Hey, Leo. Welcome home, you freak. He waved back at me, smiling broadly, pretending to be welcoming. Did you have a nice time sitting in the dirt? He asked, his voice dripping with venom. I nodded enthusiastically, as if he had asked if I was hungry. God, he's pathetic, Bella said, taking a sip of her drink. I love you too, brother, I said. My voice was raspy and used. Julian laughed. Ah, he tried to talk. Cute. I walked past them into the house. My heart was pounding a war drum in my chest. The gamble had changed. It wasn't about hearing anymore. It was about survival and revenge. The next 2 weeks were an acting performance worthy of an Academy Award. I had to relearn how to be deaf while processing a cacophony of betrayal. Every day was a test of willpower. I had to sit at the breakfast table and chew my toast while listening to my mother and father discuss my mental decline right in front of me. He's forgetting to flush the toilet, Mom lied one morning, buttering a croissant. I think the accident caused frontal lobe damage. Dr. Evans said that's grounds for incapacitation. Dr. Evans is a quack you paid off, Elena, Dad mumbled, hiding behind his newspaper. He's a professional who understands our needs, Mom snapped. Do you want to lose the lake house? Do you want Julian to go to jail for that loan shark debt? We need Leo's liquid assets, Robert. And we need them now. I paused with my coffee cup halfway to my mouth. Loan shark debt. So that was the urgency. Julian wasn't just bad with money. He was in deep with dangerous people. I kept my face blank. I stared out the window at a bird on the feeder. The hearing is on January 5th, Mom continued. Ken Briggs has the paperwork ready. We just need to keep Leo calm until then. After Christmas, we enact the transfer. Ken Briggs, our family lawyer for 20 years. The man who had been at my wedding. The man who handled my father's estate planning. He was in on it. I needed to move fast. I waited until they left the house for their country club lunch. I went to my study, which was now Julian's gaming room, and found my hidden stash of electronics. I had been an architect, but I was a tech geek at heart. I had high-fidelity voice recorders I used for site visits. I planted them everywhere. Under the dining table, behind the bookshelf in the living room, inside the hollow curtain rod in the kitchen. And then I made a call, not to Ken Briggs, but to Marcus Vane. Marcus was a shark. He was a corporate litigator who ate people like Ken Briggs for breakfast. He handled my business contracts, not my personal life, which is why my family hadn't compromised him. Marcus, I said when he picked up. Leo? His voice was shocked. I was told you couldn't use the phone. Your brother said. My brother is a liar. I cut in. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I can hear, but they don't know. And I need you to help me destroy them. I spent the next hour outlining the situation. Marcus was silent for a long time. This is fraud, Leo. Conspiracy. Elder abuse, well, disability abuse. If we can prove they are conspiring to fabricate medical evidence, they go to prison. Not just sued. Prison. I'm getting the recordings, I said. Good. But be careful. If they find out you can hear before we have the legal lock, they might try something desperate. Physical. That night, at 1:47 a.m., I got the goldmine. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wearing my hearing aids, which were actually connected via Bluetooth to the bugs I had planted. I heard footsteps in the kitchen. Julian and Bella. I don't trust Ken, Bella was whispering. He wants 30% of the settlement. That cuts into our share. Ken is necessary evil, Julian whispered back. I heard the pop of a beer can. Once Leo is in the facility, that place in Nevada is cheap, by the way, only $2,000 a month, we liquidate the portfolio. That's about $15 million after taxes. We pay off the Russians, pay off Ken, and we still have $8 million. That's enough for us to move to Cabo. And your parents? Bella asked. Julian laughed. Cold, cruel sound. Mom and Dad think they're managing the trust. But Ken slipped a clause in. Once the conservatorship is granted to Mom, She automatically assigns power of attorney to me as the active guardian because of her age. I'm going to dump them in a retirement home in Florida. The cheap kind. I almost choked. Julian wasn't just betraying me. He was betraying the very people helping him betray me. It was a snake eating its own tail. You're terrible, Bella giggled. I love it. I deserve this, Bella, Julian said, his voice taking on a whiny, entitled tone. Leo always had everything. The brains, the looks, the perfect wife. Even when she died, he got the sympathy. I've been living in his shadow my whole life. It's time I took the spotlight. I recorded every second of it. Inheritance. Fraud. Nevada facility. Russians. The next day, I drove to meet Marcus. I told the family I was going for a silent walk in the park. I walked 4 blocks, hailed a cab, and went to Marcus's downtown office. When I played the tape, Marcus's face went pale. This is it, he said, tapping his pen on the desk. This is the smoking gun. We can file an emergency injunction. We can have the police there tonight. No, I said. Marcus looked at me. Leo, you're in danger. I want them to say it in public, I said. Christmas Eve is in 3 days. They invited the investors. They invited the partners from my firm. They want to show everyone how caring they are before they lock me away. They want to use the party to solidify their narrative. You want a show, Marcus realized. I want justice, I corrected him. I want to see the look on their faces when the silence breaks. I want everyone to know who they really are. Can you have the police on standby? Marcus grinned. A sharp, predatory grin. I'll have Detective Miller there. He owes me a favor. We'll wait outside until you give the signal. What's the signal? You'll know, I said. I went back home. The house was being prepped for the party. A giant Christmas tree was being erected in the foyer. It was grotesque. They were spending my money to celebrate my demise. I walked past Julian. He stopped me, putting a hand on my shoulder. He looked me in the eyes, smiling warmly. Big night coming up, bro, he said. Gonna be great. Everyone wants to see you. I looked at his lips, pretending to focus. Then I signed, moving my hands in the basic sign language Sarah had taught me. Thank you. Julian patted my cheek. Patronizing, humiliating pat. You have no idea, he whispered. No, I thought, watching him walk away. You have no idea. The scent of pine and expensive catering filled the air. Christmas Eve had arrived. My house, my mausoleum, was transformed into a winter wonderland. White lights draped every banister. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The irony was palpable. They hired musicians for a party where the host was supposedly deaf. I was dressed in a tuxedo my mother had picked out. It was slightly too big, making me look frail, diminished. That was the point. They wanted me to look like a tragic figure, a broken man who needed their benevolent control. The guests arrived. These were people I had known for years. Mr. Chun, a developer I had worked with on the Skyline project. Mrs. Gable, a philanthropist. They approached me with pity in their eyes. They would speak slowly, loudly, waving their hands. Hello, Leo. So good to see you. I would nod, smile a vacant smile, and let my mother swoop in. Oh, he gets tired easily. Mom would coo, linking her arm through mine. It's so hard for him. But we are doing our best to keep his dignity. Dignity. She was wearing Sophie's diamond necklace. I had noticed it the moment she walked downstairs. She had raided Sophie's jewelry box. It took every ounce of my self-control not to rip it off her neck right there. Julian was holding court at the bar, pouring drinks, laughing loud, slapping backs. He was playing the role of the tragic brother perfectly, the strong one carrying the burden. Ken Briggs, the lawyer, was in the corner, looking nervous, checking his watch. I circulated the room, clutching a glass of sparkling water. My hearing aids were turned up to max sensitivity. I heard Mr. Chun whisper to his wife, "It's a shame. He was brilliant. Now look at him. Elena says he's practically invalid. Is it true he attacked the maid?" his wife whispered back. I stiffened. Attacked the maid? So that was the rumor they were spreading. Apparently, Chin said. Violent outbursts. Brain damage. That's why they have to put him in care. My hands shook. They weren't just stealing my money. They were murdering my reputation. They were making sure that even if I did fight back, no one would believe me. Oh, poor Leo, he's paranoid. It's the brain damage. Dinner was served. A long table set for 20. I was placed at the head, not as a host, but as a prop. The conversation swirled around me. The clinking of silverware. The laughter. Then Julian tapped his glass. Ting, ting, ting. The room went quiet. I'd like to propose a toast, Julian said, standing up. He looked handsome, charming. The devil in a designer suit. To family, he began, his voice thick with fake emotion. This has been the hardest year of our lives. Losing Sophie, and then losing the Leo we knew. He looked down at me. I looked up, face blank. But in this darkness we found strength, Julian continued. Mom, Dad, you have been saints. And Leo, even though he can't hear me, I want him to know that we will always protect him. We have made some difficult decisions regarding his future care, but they are made with love. To Leo, the guests chorused. My mother wiped a fake tear. We love you, Leo, she said, looking at the guests, not me. This was it. The narrative was set. They had public witnesses to their love before they signed the papers the next day. I stood up. The room went silent. Usually, I didn't stand up unless told to. I picked up my glass. I looked at Julian. I looked at my mother. I looked at Ken Briggs. Thank you, Julian, I said. My voice was clear, strong. Not the raspy croak I had faked for weeks. It was the voice of Leo Sterling, the architect who commanded construction sites. The silence that followed was different from my deafness. This was a vacuum, a collective gasp that sucked the air out of the room. Julian's smile faltered. Leo, you spoke. I did, I said, looking him dead in the eye. And I heard. My mother stood up, her face draining of color. Leo, honey, you can hear? Oh my God. It's a miracle. She tried to rush toward me to hug me, to spin this, to save the play. Sit down, Elena, I said. My voice was a whip crack. She froze. I had never called her Elena. Always Mom. I didn't just hear the toast, I said, addressing the room but locking eyes with Ken Briggs. I heard the conversation at 1:47 a.m. last Tuesday, Julian. About the Nevada facility. About the Russians. About the $15 million. Julian dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Red wine stained the white rug like blood. He's hallucinating, Julian shouted, his panic rising. It's a seizure. Mom, call the doctor. He's having an episode. I heard you too, Mom. I turned to her. I heard you tell Dad that I was a broken toy and that you couldn't wait to sell Sophie's paintings. Leo, please, Dad stammered, looking terrified. We were just. And Bella, I looked at my sister-in-law. I heard you and Ken planning to screw Julian out of his share once the money was laundered. Julian whipped his head around to look at Bella. What? He's lying, Bella shrieked. He's crazy. Am I? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a remote. I pointed it at the high-end sound system Julian had installed for the party. Track 1, I said. The speakers crackled. And then, Julian's voice boomed through the dining room, crystal clear, amplified for everyone to hear. He's a cash cow that breathes, babe. Once Mom gets that power of attorney, we ship him off to the facility, sell this monstrosity, and we are free. The guests gasped. Mr. Chun looked horrified. I skipped forward. Mom's voice. Do you want Julian to go to jail? We need Leo's liquid assets. He's forgetting to flush the toilet. Grounds for incapacitation. I skipped forward again. Bella's voice. Ken wants 30%. We pay off the Russians. I stopped the recording. The room was deathly silent. The guests were staring at my family with a mixture of shock and disgust. "You monsters," Mrs. Gable whispered. Julian was shaking. He looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted to the door. "Get out!" Julian hissed at me. "Get out of my house." "Your house." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "This is my house. That is my wine on the floor. And those," I pointed to the flashing lights appearing through the front window, "are my friends." The front door burst open. It wasn't a raid. It was a procession. Detective Miller walked in first, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Behind them was Marcus Vane, holding a thick stack of folders. "Nobody move," Miller announced. His voice was calm, authoritative. "We have warrants for the arrest of Julian Sterling, Elena Sterling, and Kenneth Briggs." "Arrest?" Mom screeched. "For what? This is a family dispute. My son is mentally unstable." Marcus stepped forward. "For conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, elder abuse, and falsifying medical records. We have the doctor's testimony, Elena. He flipped this morning to save his license. That was the nail in the coffin. The fake doctor." Julian tried to run. It was pathetic, really. He bolted toward the patio doors. Officer Martinez, a big guy I had met once or twice, tackled him before he even reached the glass. Julian hit the floor with a thud that I heard with satisfying clarity. "Get off me! Do you know who I am?" Julian screamed. "Yeah," I said, walking over to him. I looked down at my brother, pinned to the floor, his tuxedo ruined. "You're the guy who broke the castle. But I'm not fixing it this time." Ken Briggs was arrested quietly. He knew the game was up. He put his hands behind his back and lowered his head, not saying a word. My father was sitting in his chair, weeping. He wasn't being arrested yet. Marcus had decided to use him as a witness against the others, playing on his cowardice. "Leo," Dad sobbed. "I'm sorry. They made me." "Stop," I said. "Just stop." I walked over to my mother. She was being handcuffed by a female officer. She wasn't crying anymore. Her mask had fallen. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You ungrateful wretch," she spat. "We gave you life. And you tried to steal it back," I said. "Give me the necklace." "What?" "Sophie's necklace. Take it off." She hesitated. The officer nodded. Mom fumbled with the clasp with shaking hands and handed it to me. I clutched the cool diamonds in my hand. It felt like I was holding a piece of Sophie's soul, rescuing her from this filth. The guests were being ushered out by the police. They looked at me with apologies in their eyes, but I didn't care about them. I cared about the silence. The real silence. The silence of a house that was finally clean. "Take them away," Detective Miller ordered. As they dragged Julian out, he was screaming profanities, blaming Bella, blaming Mom, blaming me. Then the door closed. I stood alone in the dining room. The broken glass was still on the floor. The food was getting cold. Sarah walked in from the kitchen. She had been hiding, watching everything. She had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Mr. Leo?" she whispered. I turned to her. "I can hear you, Sarah." She ran to me and hugged me. For the first time in 18 months, I felt a hug that was genuine. "Clean house?" she asked, pulling back. "Clean house." I nodded. I walked over to the window and watched the police cruisers fade into the night, their red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to the Lamborghini. Julian had left them on the bar. I tossed them in the trash can. I wouldn't drive that car again. It was tainted. I was deaf for 18 months. But tonight, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. The sound of the door locking behind them. The silence that followed the arrest wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a bomb goes off. For the first time in 18 months, the house was truly mine again, but it felt like a stranger's skin. Sarah and I spent the rest of Christmas Eve cleaning. We didn't hire a crew. We did it ourselves. There was something therapeutic about scrubbing the red wine stains, Julian's spilled wine, out of the white carpet. With every scrub, I felt like I was erasing their fingerprints from my life. "You don't have to do this, Mr. Leo," Sarah said, wringing out a cloth. "You should rest. Your head." "My head is fine, Sarah," I replied, the sound of my own voice still surprising me slightly. "I need to do this. I need to see it disappear." The next morning, Christmas Day, I didn't wake up to family breakfast. I woke up to a phone call from Detective Miller. "Merry Christmas, Leo." Miller's voice was gruff but kind. "I thought you'd want an update. We denied bail. Flight risk. Your brother tried to bribe the booking officer with a watch that turned out to be a fake Rolex. Seems fitting." I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that rattled in my chest. "Thank you, Detective." The legal battle that followed over the next 3 months was a different kind of war. It wasn't fought with secrets and silence, but with paperwork and depositions. Marcus Vane was a gladiator. He didn't just want a conviction. He wanted a total dismantling of their power. I went to see them once. Just once. It was 3 weeks after the arrest. Marcus advised against it, but I needed to look them in the eye one last time without the facade of the deaf victim. I needed them to see Leo, the man. I visited my parents first. They were being held in a county detention center, unable to post the massive bail set by the judge. My mother, Elena, looked 20 years older. Without her expensive creams, her spa treatments, and her designer clothes, she looked small, frail. When I sat down behind the glass, she didn't look at me with anger. She looked at me with calculation. "Leo," she said into the phone receiver, her voice trembling. "Leo, baby, you have to stop this. You're confused. Julian made us do it. Your father and I. We were scared of him." I stared at her. Even here, in a jumpsuit, she was trying to manipulate me. She was throwing her golden child under the bus to save herself. "I heard the recordings, Mother," I said calmly. "I heard you call me a broken toy. I heard you planning to sell Sophie's paintings. Julian didn't make you say those things. That was you. That was your heart. We are your parents," she snapped, the mask slipping. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us." "I don't owe you my dignity," I said, "and I certainly don't owe you my wife's legacy." I hung up the phone while she was still screaming. I didn't look back. Julian was different. When I saw him, he was sitting in the interview room with a smug look on his face, despite the shackles. He truly believed he could talk his way out of this. "You think you won?" Julian sneered. "You think you're smart because you tricked us? You're still a cripple, Leo. You're still the guy whose wife died because he couldn't control a car in the rain." It was a low blow, the lowest, but it didn't hurt. Not anymore, because I knew the truth about who he was. "I'm alive, Julian," I said, "and I'm free. You're going to prison, and when you get out, you'll have nothing. No money, no family, no power. You're going to have to work for a living. I think that's the worst punishment I could imagine for you." I stood up to leave, but Julian slammed his fist on the table. "You don't know everything," he yelled. "You think the accident was just bad luck? You think Sophie didn't know?" I froze. "What are you talking about?" He grinned, a jagged, malicious expression. "Ask yourself why the brakes failed, Leo. Ask yourself why Sophie was so nervous that night." He was trying to get inside my head, trying to plant a seed of doubt to torture me. I walked out, his laughter echoing in the hallway. But his words stuck. Why the brakes failed. The investigation concluded in late March. The evidence I had gathered was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the falsified medical records from the crooked doctor, the bank transfers, it was a slam dunk. Julian took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year sentence. He pleaded guilty to grand larceny, conspiracy, and fraud. He got 7 years in state prison. My parents were not charged criminally to the same extent due to their age and Marcus's strategy to focus on Julian, but the civil repercussions destroyed them. They were forced to liquidate their assets to pay back what they stole from me and to cover legal fees. They declared bankruptcy. They moved into a small one-bedroom assisted living apartment in Florida, paid for by the state. The humiliation was their prison. Ken Briggs was disbarred and faced his own 2-year sentence for professional misconduct and fraud. Justice was served, but I was still living in the mausoleum. I couldn't stay in that house. Every corner held a memory of betrayal. The dining room where the toast happened, the patio where they laughed at me, even the guest room where I slept in silence. I put the estate on the market in April. It sold in 3 days to a tech billionaire from California. Packing up was emotional but necessary. Sarah helped me. We boxed up the bad memories and donated the furniture. But when we got to the attic, looking for Sophie's old art supplies, I found something that stole the breath from my lungs. It was Sophie's journal. It had fallen behind a stack of canvases. I sat on the dusty floor and opened it. The last entry was dated 2 days before the accident. I don't know how to tell Leo. I found the transfers. Julian has been siphoning money from the firm's operational account. It's not just gambling, he owes people. Bad people. I saw him near the garage yesterday, messing with Leo's car. When I asked him what he was doing, he looked at me like he wanted to kill me. I'm scared. I need to tell Leo, but I don't want to break his heart. If something happens... The handwriting trailed off. I sat there for a long time, the book trembling in my hands. Julian's words in the jail cell came back to me. Ask yourself why the brakes failed. He did it, or he tried to. He tampered with the car. Maybe he didn't mean to kill us, maybe just scare us, or maybe he wanted me out of the way so he could take over the firm sooner. The accident wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder that resulted in manslaughter. A cold rage, darker than anything I had felt before, washed over me. I could reopen the case. I could charge him with murder. I could ensure he never saw the light of day again. I reached for my phone to call Marcus. My thumb hovered over the screen. I looked around the dusty attic. I listened to the sound of the wind outside. If I did this, if I pursued a murder trial, I would be tied to Julian for another 2, 3, maybe 5 years. I would have to relive the accident in court. I would have to see autopsy photos of Sophie. I would have to let him occupy my mind, my energy, my life. He was already in prison. He was ruined. Sophie wrote, I don't want to break his heart. She wouldn't want me to spend the next decade in a courtroom fighting a ghost. She would want me to live. I closed the journal. I didn't call Marcus. Instead, I whispered, I know, sophomore. I know. I took the journal and placed it in the box with her paintings. That night, I drove out to the lake, lit a small fire, and burned the journal. I watched the smoke rise into the starlit sky. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the final act of release. I wasn't letting him get away with it. I was letting myself get away from him. I used the money from the house sale to buy a plot of land in Fremont, near the mountains. It was quiet there. Real quiet, not the silence of deafness, but the silence of peace. I designed a new house, not a mansion, a cabin. High ceilings, lots of glass, wood, and stone. A place that breathed. I started therapy with Dr. Nora, a specialist in trauma. For the first few sessions, I just sat there and listened to the clock tick. I had to learn how to trust sound again. I had to learn that not every whisper was a conspiracy. Not every smile was a lie. Trust is a muscle, Leo, Dr. Nora told me. Yours was severed just like your nerve. You have to rebuild it rep by rep. I hired Sarah as my house manager for the new cabin. I doubled her salary. She wasn't just staff. She was the only family I had left. 6 months after the trial, I stood on the deck of my new home. The smell of pine needles and damp earth filled the air. I could hear the wind rustling through the Douglas firs. I could hear a hawk crying out in the distance. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had started consulting again. I was designing a new community center for the deaf in Seattle, a pro bono project. I wanted to create spaces where sound was felt, not just heard. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. Thought you'd like to know. Julian's appeal was denied. He's being transferred to maximum security. It's over, Leo. I put the phone down. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun was breaking through the clouds. The storm was over. The silence was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I liked what I heard. There is a specific spot on my deck where the acoustics are perfect. If you sit there at 6 p.m., the wind coming off the mountain creates a low, humming melody as it passes through the valley. It's nature's cello. I sit here often. I'm Leo, the man who was deaf, the man who was betrayed, the man who rebuilt himself. Looking back, I realized that my deafness was, in a strange, twisted way, a gift. It stripped away the noise. It forced me to see people for who they were, not who they said they were. We rely so much on words. We let people charm us, manipulate us, and lie to us with beautiful sentences. But when you take away the sound, you are left with action. You are left with the truth. My family told me they loved me every day. We love you, Leo. We're here for you, Leo. The words were perfect. But their eyes, their hands, their actions, those screamed contempt. I spent 18 months in a silent prison, but the real prison was the life I was living before the accident. A life where I was surrounded by people who viewed me as a paycheck, not a person. I think about Sophie often. I think about her paintings that now hang on every wall of this cabin. She saw it. She saw the darkness in Julian long before I did. I was too busy being the good brother, the dutiful son, to admit that my family was toxic. I let loyalty blind me. That's the thing about toxic family dynamics. It's like a frog in boiling water. You don't realize you're dying until the water is already boiling. You make excuses. That's just how mom is. Julian is just going through a phase. We gaslight ourselves to avoid the pain of the truth. But the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can set you free. I've learned to listen differently now. I don't just listen to words. I listen to the intent behind them. I listen to the pauses. I listen to what people don't say. I've also learned that family isn't defined by blood. Blood is just biology. Family is Sarah, who risked her job to help me sneak out to a doctor. Family is Marcus, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Family is Dr. Thorne, who took a risk on a broken man. Family are the people who show up when you have nothing to offer them but yourself. I'm dating again. Her name is Elena. Ironic, I know, but she goes by Ellie. She's a landscape architect. She knows my story. She knows I have trust issues. She knows that sometimes I just need to turn off my hearing aids and sit in silence for an hour. And she sits with me. She doesn't try to fill the silence with chatter. She holds my hand, and we watch the sunset. That is love. Love is comfortable in the quiet. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream of the crash. I dream of Julian's face laughing at me. I dream of the silence returning, permanent this time. But then I wake up. I hear the rain on the roof. I hear the refrigerator humming. I hear the life I fought so hard to reclaim. I didn't just get my hearing back. I got my voice back. And I promised myself I would never let anyone silence me again. Closing thoughts and lessons if you have stayed with me through this journey. Through the accident, the silence, the betrayal, and the justice, I want to thank you. I shared this story not just to vent, but because I know I'm not alone. There is a powerful lesson here that I paid a high price to learn, and I want to pass it on to you. Trust your intuition over your loyalty. We are taught that family comes first, that blood is thicker than water. But sometimes, family is the most dangerous blind spot we have. If you feel like you are being used, if you feel small and disrespected in your own home, listen to that feeling. Your gut knows the truth long before your heart is ready to accept it. Financial abuse is real abuse. It doesn't always look like someone stealing your wallet. Sometimes it looks like managing your accounts because you're too stressed. It looks like guilt-tripping you for money. It looks like entitlement. Protect yourself. Set boundaries. No is a complete sentence. And finally, listen to the actions, not the words. People can say anything, but what they do, how they treat you when you have nothing to give, how they speak about you when they think you can't hear, that is who they really are. I want to hear from you now. I want this to be a conversation, not just a monologue. Have you ever had a moment where you realized a family member or close friend wasn't who you thought they were? How did you handle it? Did you trust your gut? Or did you try to fix it like I did? Drop a comment below sharing your experience, or just one piece of advice you'd give to someone in my situation. Or, if this story resonated with you and you agree that we need to normalize cutting off toxic family members for our own peace, simply comment the word, good. It tells me that you stand for self-respect and truth. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being my witnesses. My name is Leo, and for the first time in a long time, I am listening to a future that sounds absolutely beautiful.